On the loneliest road in Kansas, rain hammered the earth like it was trying to wash away old secrets. Out in the storm, a single German shepherd huddled by the roadside, mud-streaked ribs showing eyes empty of hope. Who left him here, and what story does he carry behind those haunted eyes? Sometimes the biggest miracles begin with the smallest act of kindness. Stay with us, because what happens next will change the way you see loyalty, love, and second chances forever. Don't miss the rest of this remarkable journey. On the loneliest road in Kansas, rain hammered the earth like it was trying to wash away old secrets. Out in the storm, a single German shepherd huddled by the roadside, mud-streaked ribs showing eyes empty of hope. Who left him here, and what story does he carry behind those haunted eyes? Sometimes the biggest miracles begin with the smallest act of kindness. Stay with us, because what happens next will change the way you see loyalty, love, and second chances forever. Don't miss the rest of this remarkable journey. The rain had been falling for hours over Willow Creek, a small Kansas town cradled between rolling wheat fields and muddy riverbanks. At dusk, the world seemed washed in gray and gold, the sky a bruised tapestry, the earth fragrant with wet grain, the rare passing headlights gleaming across rain-streaked windows. Willow Creek was the kind of place where nothing ever truly hurried, but tonight the storm lashed the empty streets, urging even the slowest souls to hurry home. Jessica Evans hunched over the steering wheel of her aging Ford pickup windshield wipers, slapping away the sheets of water that blurred the road ahead. She was 35 tall and athletic, with wavy brown hair always half tucked into a bun, and eyes the soft, thoughtful green of spring grass after rain. Her features held a gentle strength, as if her kindness had been shaped by years of struggle and endurance. Jessica had the kind of presence that made animals relax. Children stopped crying, and grown men paused before raising their voices. Years working in emergency veterinary clinics in the city had left her with deep compassion, but also a kind of haunted resilience. She returned to Willow Creek to escape memories of things she couldn't fix and lives she couldn't save. The headlights swept across the road's edge, and for a moment, Jessica thought she saw movement. Slowing, she squinted through the blur. There, hunched by a fence post, where the road bent toward endless wheat, was a dark shape. She pulled over gravel, crunching under the tires. Rain hammered the hood as she stepped out, her boots splashing in roadside puddles. The shape resolved into a dog, a German shepherd, large but gaunt, its fur plastered to its sides. Tail curled tightly, ribs visible through the soaked coat. The animal didn't move as Jessica approached, only lifted its head slightly. Ears flat, golden brown eyes watching her with a mixture of suspicion and exhaustion. There was a cut along one ear, and old scars marked its muzzle. The dog's body trembled, but it didn't bare its teeth or growl. Jessica crouched, speaking in a soft, even tone. "Hey there, friend. You look like you've had a rough night." She reached into her jacket for a protein bar, breaking it in half and extending a piece. The dog recoiled, pressing itself against the fence. Its eyes followed every movement with an unsettling wariness, as if it expected pain at any moment. Jessica paused, heart aching not just for the dog's suffering, but for whatever had taught it to fear even simple kindness. She waited, letting the dog see she meant no harm. The rain chilled her to the bone, but she stayed still until finally the shepherd allowed her to slip a leash over its neck. Its acceptance was grudging, as if it had run out of energy to resist. Guiding the dog gently, Jessica led it to the truck, lifting it into the back seat. As she settled behind the wheel, she glanced in the rearview mirror. The dog Shadow, she decided naming him for, the way he seemed more ghost than creature, lay pressed against the door, eyes wide and unblinking. 10 minutes later, Jessica pulled into the gravel lot beside Evans Veterinary Clinic, a squat brick building with blue trim and a faded sign. The storm rattled the roof as she carried Shadow inside, passing through the lobby, which smelled of antiseptic lavender and old books. She laid out towels by the heater, setting Shadow down and offering a bowl of water and some food. The dog didn't touch either, just watched with those haunted, searching eyes. Jessica examined him for injuries. Other than minor cuts and old bruises, there were no fresh wounds. But there was something tense in his muscles, a readiness to bolt. The clinic's back door banged open, and in came Daniel Evans, Jessica's 17-year-old brother. Daniel was tall and skinny, with shaggy blonde hair that always fell in his eyes, wire-rimmed glasses slipping down his nose, and hands stained with ink from sketching in his ever-present notebook. He was shy around strangers, but had a natural gentleness that drew animals to him. His voice was quiet and low, and his imagination spun worlds far beyond Willow Creek's slow pace. "Did you bring in another stray?" Daniel's voice was a blend of amusement and concern. Jessica nodded, still kneeling by Shadow. "Found him on the old East Road. He's in bad shape, Danny, and scared." Daniel approached slowly, eyes wide as he took in the German Shepherd's battered state. He crouched beside his sister, careful not to crowd the dog. "He looks like he's seen ghosts," Daniel murmured. He set his backpack down and absently reached for a stack of old books on the shelf, the ones he often read, while waiting for Jessica to finish late-night emergencies. The hours stretched. Shadow would not eat or drink. When Jessica tried coaxing him, he turned his head away, flinching even at her gentle touch. She draped a dry towel over him, hoping warmth might help. Daniel, sensing the tension in the room, wandered toward the storage alcove at the back of the clinic, a cozy, cluttered space filled with files, old pet carriers, and boxes of unsorted memorabilia from their father's days running the clinic. Rummaging for something to distract himself, Daniel's hand brushed against a battered leather-bound notebook wedged between dusty boxes. He pulled it out, wiping dust from the cover. The first page bore their father's elegant handwriting, "The Dogs Who Saved Willow Creek." Curious, Daniel settled onto an old wooden bench and began to read. The stories inside spoke of brave animals, dogs who had pulled children from the river, led rescue parties through blizzards, guarded lonely farmhouses from coyotes. Some stories were nearly a century old, passed down through generations of townsfolk, each name and date carefully inscribed. Daniel's mind raced with questions. Could Shadow be one of those rare dogs with an unspoken purpose? Some reason he'd come to their town on a stormy night? Or was he like so many others, just another soul tossed aside by a world that too often failed its loyal companions? As Jessica moved quietly around the clinic, preparing antibiotics, checking on other patients, tidying supplies, she found her thoughts drifting to the old stories Daniel loved so much. She wondered if in some quiet way Willow Creek's legacy of animal heroes was calling out again. By midnight, the storm had lessened, though rain still beat a steady rhythm on the windows. Shadow remained silent, watching every move with the stillness of a hunted thing. Daniel, lost in the stories of heroic dogs, felt an inexplicable sense of hope blooming in his chest. He showed Jessica the notebook, pointing to a page about a German shepherd who had led search parties decades ago. Jessica smiled bittersweet and brushed Daniel's hair from his eyes. "Maybe this one just needs time," she whispered. Shadow's only answer was a slow blink, as if uncertain what to make of kindness. Jessica sighed, settling onto the bench beside Daniel, the two siblings keeping vigil as the world outside slowly washed itself clean. The night deepened. Outside, the wheat fields bent under the weight of rain, their golden stalks whispering stories older than memory. Inside the clinic, hope flickered, fragile but present in the shape of a trembling, silent dog and the hands that refused to give up on him. The rain faded into a chilly, damp morning that left Willow Creek shrouded in mist. Light filtered through the clinic's windows in pale, watery beams, casting everything in a gentle blue haze. Jessica had hardly slept, rising before dawn to check on Shadow. She found him curled up on the towels, still and watchful, his golden brown eyes half-lidded, but always alert. The German shepherd hadn't moved much through the night. When Jessica approached, he tensed, nostrils flaring. She squatted down beside him and spoke in that soft, steady voice she'd honed from years of tending wounded creatures. "Morning, Shadow. Let's see if you'll let me help you today." He did not flinch as she stroked his head, though his muscles stayed taut. With gentle hands, Jessica began her exam. She noted the healing scars on his legs and flank, as well as an old burn near his shoulder that made her wince. When she tried to inspect his mouth, however, Shadow jerked his head away and let out a whimper, sharp, almost human. "Easy boy," Jessica murmured, patience unwavering. She persisted, stroking his ears and jaw until he relaxed just enough to allow her a quick look inside. Her brow furrowed. High on the upper gum, nearly hidden by stained teeth and swollen tissue, was a small metallic glint. It was not a tooth or bone, but something foreign, perhaps a chip or shard of metal. As she drew her hand away, Shadow's breathing quickened and his whole body trembled. Jessica straightened, concern tightening her features. Daniel, come here. Her brother entered the room, still wearing yesterday's t-shirt and Jean's hair, even messier than usual. He put down his notebook, worry etched on his pale face. Is he okay? There's something in his mouth, Jessica said quietly. A piece of metal. No wonder he won't eat. Daniel nodded, then knelt beside Shadow, murmuring nonsense words and running gentle fingers over the dog's fur. There was a bond already forming, one that Jessica recognized from their childhood, when Daniel could charm even the most skittish animals with his patient presence. A few minutes later, the clinic's bell jingled. The front door swung open, and in swept Mrs. Ruthie Wilson, carrying the scent of rain and the sturdy authority of someone who'd spent her life commanding fields and animals. Ruthie was in her late 60s, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-leathered skin and silver hair plaited into a tight braid. Her hands, large and strong from years of farm work, still moved with surprising gentleness. She wore old denim overalls over a flannel shirt, mud caked on her boots. Ruthie was known in Willow Creek as much for her no-nonsense wisdom as for her booming laugh and fiercely independent streak. She had managed her family's wheat farm since her husband passed and took pride in knowing every animal on her land. Well, if it isn't the Evans siblings, Ruthie greeted, voice warm but robust. She set a basket of fresh eggs and sweet rolls on the counter, her usual payment for Jessica's help with her aging sheepdogs. She spotted Shadow instantly. That's a mighty sorry-looking shepherd. Stray looks that way, Jessica replied and explained Shadow's situation. Ruthie knelt beside the dog, her hands surprisingly gentle as she let him sniff her fingers. He's scared, but he's got a smart head on him. Reminds me of old Lucky, that dog who pulled me out of the North Field during the blizzard of '89. Ruthie's eyes softened, the edges crinkling with old memory. If not for that mutt, I'd have been a goner. While Jessica prepared to take x-rays of Shadow's mouth, Ruthie and Daniel sat in the waiting room. Ruthie's stories spilled out, painting vivid pictures of dogs braving storms, chasing off coyotes, and saving lives. Daniel listened rapt, jotting notes in his battered notebook. Ruthie noticed her smile turning sly. Gonna put my old Lucky in your stories, eh? Daniel blushed, but Ruthie's approval was obvious. Meanwhile, Jessica struggled to calm Shadow for the x-ray. She wrapped him gently in a towel and murmured soothing words. With patience, she managed to get a quick scan of his mouth. As the film developed, Jessica's frown deepened. The image was clear, a tiny piece of metal, perhaps a microchip or some foreign object embedded just above the canine. It wasn't the kind of chip used for identification. Its edges were sharp and irregular, nothing like the smooth, regulated tags she implanted in pets. This is no accident, she muttered. Before she could dwell on it, another figure arrived at the clinic. Sheriff Tom Carter, a man in his early 50s with a thick mustache and steady blue eyes, stepped inside. Tom was broad-shouldered, his uniform neat, and boots always polished. He was respected in Willow Creek for his fairness, but also known for his cautious, methodical nature. Some called him slow to trust, but never slow to act when his mind was made up. The sheriff had grown up in town and returned after a stint with the state police, carrying the burden of too many unsolved cases. Jessica greeted him with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Morning, Tom. Everything all right? Tom nodded, eyeing Shadow. Heard you picked up a stray German shepherd. Normally I'd let that be, but there's been a rash of cattle missing up near the river. Farmers are nervous. Thought I'd check if your new guest matches any descriptions. Jessica bristled, instinctively protective. He's wounded, not dangerous. Someone's done something to him. Tom studied the dog, his gaze softening a little. I know you, Jess, but I've got to ask. If he's part of something bigger, I'll need to know. While Jessica explained Shadow's condition and showed Tom the x-ray, Daniel returned to Ruthie's side, who continued her stories. Ruthie leaned closer to Daniel, her voice lowering. Dogs, they don't choose where they end up. Sometimes folks try to use them, shape them into something they're not. But a dog's heart is stubborn, even when it's broken. Daniel thought of Shadow, silent and stoic on the blanket, and wondered what kind of life had left him so wary. Sheriff Tom eventually agreed to let Jessica keep Shadow for observation, but asked her to notify him of any changes. If he starts acting strange, or if anyone comes looking for him, you call me, he said. He left his presence lingering like a question that had not been fully answered. The day passed quietly. Jessica cleaned Shadow's wounds and gave him antibiotics, checking the strange object in his mouth and considering the best way to remove it. Daniel spent his time reorganizing the supply room, and when not needed returned to Ruthie's side to hear more about Lucky's blizzard rescue. Ruthie described being lost in a whiteout wind so fierce she could barely breathe until Lucky, a mongrel with one ear, tracked her by scent and barked until rescuers found them. "Smartest dog I ever knew," Ruthie said, her voice full of respect. "When a dog chooses to save you, that's not luck. That's love and grit." As dusk fell, Shadow finally took a few tentative laps of water and allowed Daniel to sit beside him, though he still flinched at sudden sounds. Jessica and Daniel ate dinner in the break room, discussing next steps. "If that chip is making him hurt, we need to get it out," Jessica said. "I'll schedule the surgery tomorrow." Daniel, still holding the old notebook, replied, "Maybe Shadow's meant to be here, Lucky like the others." Jessica smiled, her tired eyes lighting with hope. Outside, the clouds finally broke, revealing stars above the damp fields. Inside the clinic, the warmth of Ruthie's stories and Jessica's gentle hands began ever so slightly to chip away at the darkness that Shadow carried with him. A thin veil of morning mist still lingered across the fields when Jessica loaded Shadow gently into the back of her pickup. Daniel clambered into the passenger seat, notebook in hand, eyes bright with curiosity and worry. The German Shepherd was quieter today, his coat brushed and a fresh bandage on his flank, but his movements remained cautious, every step measured and deliberate. Jessica started the truck, the engine rumbling to life. "Today's the day, big guy," she said quietly, glancing in the rearview mirror. Shadow met her gaze for an instant, then turned to watch the world slide past the window as they drove toward the county animal hospital. The county hospital in Willow Creek was a slightly larger, more modern building than Jessica's own clinic, with big glass doors and a waiting room painted a cheerful, outdated yellow. The walls were lined with faded posters about flea prevention and cheerful reminders to spay and neuter. At the reception desk sat Abby Jenkins, a young woman in her 20s with curly red hair pulled into a ponytail and freckles dotting her round, open face. Abby was known for her contagious laugh and easy chatter. She loved animals, but was secretly afraid of large dogs. Still, she mustered a brave smile as Jessica carried Shadow in. "That's the new stray?" Abby asked, her voice bright, though her eyes widened slightly at Shadow's size. "Looks like he's been through a war." "He might have," Jessica replied gently. "We need a full x-ray. There's something in his mouth." Abby led them to the back, typing on her tablet with quick, nimble fingers. Daniel lingered, peering around the hospital, taking in the rows of crates, the soft whimpers and occasional bark of animals waiting for their turn. He noticed a board on the wall, "Missing Pets in Kansas," with photos of dogs, cats, and even a few parrots. He took out his phone and snapped a picture of the board ideas already forming. In the x-ray room, Jessica held Shadow still, while the technician, a wiry man named Blake, mid-40s, pale blue eyes, salt and pepper stubble, and the calm, efficient air of someone who'd seen everything set up the machine. Blake was the type to speak little, but his patience with animals was legendary. "Easy, fella," Blake murmured, guiding Shadow's head into position with practiced hands. Shadow tensed at the humming of the equipment, but didn't struggle. Daniel stood at the doorway, chewing his lip, recording every detail in his notebook. "This might hurt a little, but we'll be quick," Jessica promised. After a few tense minutes, the machine beeped, and Blake printed out the images. The three of them crowded around the lightbox as Blake adjusted the films. The image was stark and clear. Embedded above Shadow's right canine was a small rectangular object about the size of a pea with defined edges and a faint coil visible within its shell. Jessica exhaled, brow furrowing. "That's no accident," she said. "That looks like a microchip, but nothing like the ones we use for pet identification. This is different." Blake nodded, tapping the image. "You want to get that out. Sooner rather than later. If it moves, it could cause real trouble." "Any idea what it is?" Daniel asked quietly. Blake shook his head. "Not from here, but I've heard stories lately. A few dogs brought in from other towns, same kind of chip, same kind of scars." Jessica felt a chill creep up her arms. "I'll call for a surgical consult, but first let's get Shadow back to the clinic. He'll be calmer there." They thanked Abby and Blake and made their way back into the now busy parking lot. Daniel, silent, scrolled through the photos of the missing pets board as they drove. "Jess, look at this," he said, holding up his phone. "Some of these dogs look like Shadow, and they're all missing from towns less than 50 miles away." Jessica glanced over, worry deepening in her expression. "It's not just him," she murmured. There's something bigger going on. Back at the clinic, Shadow slumped gratefully onto his pile of towels, resting his head on his paws. Jessica called the nearest veterinary surgeon, arranging for the chip to be removed the following afternoon. She spent the rest of the day reviewing his x-rays, researching odd chips, and animal trafficking reports on her computer. Meanwhile, Daniel retreated to the office. He logged onto his old laptop, hunched over the flickering screen, searching for any articles about stolen dogs, illegal breeding, or exotic animal trade. Daniel's world had always lived half in reality, half in stories. Now the two seemed to be colliding. While searching, he sent a message to his online friend Casey, a high schooler in Oklahoma with a passion for animal rights and a knack for digging up obscure news. They'd never met, but Casey's support had helped Daniel through tough years at school. He wrote, "Have you heard anything about German shepherds with weird chips in Kansas or stolen dogs in small towns?" It wasn't long before a reply came. "Yes. There's a thread on a rescue forum someone posted about a network stealing working dogs, putting weird tech in them. Police barely look at it. I'll send you links." Casey's email arrived moments later, full of posts about rare breeds disappearing, microchip tampering, and rumors of a shadowy market for trained animals. Daniel's fingers shook as he clicked through, piecing together a picture darker than he'd expected. Late that afternoon, as Jessica organized the supply closet, the bell over the clinic door jangled. Daniel looked up from his computer. A tall man stepped inside, rain dripping from the brim of his brown fedora. He was in his late 40s with a gaunt, clean-shaven face, deep-set eyes, and a neat gray suit that somehow looked both expensive and out of place in Willow Creek. The man moved with the cautious precision of someone always sizing up a room. His gaze landed on Daniel, then swept over the waiting area, pausing on the back room where Shadow rested. "Excuse me," he said, voice low and formal. "I'm looking for a lost German shepherd, male, large, dark coat. He went missing outside of Garden City last week." Jessica stepped forward, measuring him with a practiced eye. "I haven't seen any strays from that direction, but we did find a German shepherd last night. He's being treated for injuries. May I ask your name?" The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Call me Mr. Barnes." He handed Jessica a business card, plain with only a phone number, and the name J. Barnes Consultant. His handshake was cold, his fingers long and bony. "I'd like to see the dog if you don't mind." Jessica hesitated. "He's resting after x-rays. I'm afraid visitors might agitate him." Barnes's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, a flicker of something sharp passed over his features. "I understand, but I'd appreciate a call if you find any information about him." He turned and left as quietly as he had entered, leaving behind the faint scent of aftershave and damp wool. Daniel watched him go, feeling a chill despite the heater humming in the background. "He gave me the creeps," he whispered to Jessica. "Why would someone in a suit be looking for a stray out here?" Jessica shrugged, but her mind was already racing with possibilities. She tucked the business card into her pocket, making a mental note to search the number later. That night, as the clinic quieted, Daniel emailed Casey about Mr. Barnes and the encounter. He also spent hours comparing photos of missing dogs with Shadow's features, convinced now that something sinister connected the dots. Jessica, meanwhile, made a careful plan for the surgery. She stroked Shadow's head as he drifted into uneasy sleep, promising, "We'll get you through this, no matter what it takes." Outside, the Kansas wind rustled through the fields. In the distance, the first stars appeared, indifferent to the secrets they watched from above. The next morning, Willow Creek was bathed in sunlight, dew shimmering on every blade of grass, the previous day's tension melting into the hush of early spring. The town had its usual rhythm, milk trucks on the road, the distant clatter of a train, and the scent of warm wheat drifting in from the fields. At the Evans Veterinary Clinic, Jessica moved with quiet purpose, preparing for what might be the most important surgery she'd performed since returning home. Daniel sat with Shadow on the examination table, one hand on the German shepherd's back. The dog's body was still tense, but less so than the day before. His coat was glossy where Jessica had cleaned him, and his golden eyes flicked now and then toward Daniel with cautious interest. Daniel whispered gentle encouragements, hoping to anchor Shadow to the present. Daniel's own face looked tired but determined. Purple shadows beneath his eyes betrayed a night spent searching online forums, swapping anxious emails with Casey, and scribbling possible outcomes in the margins of his notebook. Jessica, dressed in clean scrubs and her hair tied back with a blue bandana, methodically sterilized the surgical tools. She glanced at her brother and the dog, feeling the odd intimacy of the moment. Daniel reminded her of their father, gentle, quietly stubborn, unwilling to give up on the lost and the frightened. Jessica's hands only trembled slightly as she prepared the anesthetic. Soon, Ruthie Wilson arrived, still in her denim overalls, cheeks pink from the sun, her braid neat, and boots freshly polished despite the mud outside. She set a basket of warm biscuits on the counter. For luck, she said, her voice steady, but her eyes glistening with worry. Ruthie glanced at Shadow, her expression softening. "I saw a couple trucks parked near the edge of my wheat field last night. No reason for them to be there at that hour. Someone's sniffing around." Jessica and Daniel exchanged a look. Their small world was growing less safe by the hour. "I'll call Tom after the surgery," Jessica promised, but the fear in her chest was real. The surgery room was small but spotless. Daniel stroked Shadow's head as Jessica injected the anesthetic. The German Shepherd's eyes fluttered and his breathing slowed. Jessica worked in silence, focused on each precise movement, her hands steady. Now her mind running through every emergency scenario she had ever faced. With Ruthie and Daniel standing by, Jessica made a careful incision inside Shadow's upper gum. The foreign object, sharp-edged metallic about the size of a bean, was embedded in the tissue but had not fused to the bone. Jessica extracted it, her gloved fingers trembling with relief. She held it up to the light. It was unlike any pet microchip she had ever seen, marked with a faint serial number and an odd pattern of copper coils. Daniel gasped. "That's not a normal chip." Ruthie leaned over, squinting. "You think someone put that there on purpose?" Jessica nodded grimly, cleaning the wound and stitching it closed with practiced hands. "No doubt about it. But why?" The procedure took less than an hour, but for Daniel, it felt like a lifetime. He never left Shadow's side, murmuring stories from their father's old notebook, tales of dogs that braved fire and flood. When Shadow finally stirred, still groggy from the anesthesia, Daniel was there to offer a bowl of water. Shadow drank a hesitant, grateful sound that filled the room with hope. Jessica watched, heart swelling. "He's eating and drinking again? That's a good sign." Daniel reached out, and for the first time, Shadow let him run his fingers through the fur behind his ear. The German Shepherd's tail thumped weakly against the towel, and a tremulous peace settled over the little clinic. Meanwhile, Ruthie returned to her farm, concern gnawing at her. That afternoon, she decided to check the edges of her property, curious about the trucks she'd seen the night before. She was joined by her neighbor, Mr. Carl Jensen, a wiry man in his late 70s, stooped from years of working the land, face weathered like old leather, but sharp-eyed and watchful. Carl was taciturn, preferring the company of his sheepdogs to people, but he respected Ruthie's judgment. They found half hidden in the tall grass a small black device the size of a deck of cards, blinking with a faint red light. Ruthie picked it up, turning it over in her hands. "What do you think?" Carl frowned. "That's no farming tool. I'd bet my last bale of hay someone's been tracking that dog. Or us." Back at the clinic, Shadow rested in the sun by the front window, his breathing slow and easy. Jessica busied herself sending photos of the chip to her contacts in the state vet network and emailing the county authorities. Daniel sat nearby, checking his inbox obsessively for new messages from Casey. He updated his friend on the surgery's success and the strange chip. Within minutes, Casey replied, "That matches the photo someone posted last month. Dogs with these chips have gone missing across 3 states. You should be careful." The hours drifted by. Shadow, though sleepy, began to explore the clinic with hesitant steps, sniffing the corners and peering curiously at the cat in the crate by the supply closet. The cat Pumpkin, an orange tabby with a torn ear and a perpetual scowl, watched him warily, but didn't hiss. Daniel observed, jotting notes on animal behavior for his ongoing story project. Late in the day, Tom Carter stopped by, drawn by Ruthie's report about the strange trucks and the device she'd found. The sheriff's broad frame filled the doorway, his hat in hand, brow furrowed with concern. Tom examined the chip and the tracking device, whistling low. "This is more than just a lost dog, Jess. I'll call the state police. For now, keep your doors locked and don't let anyone in you don't trust." Night fell softly, the sky blooming with stars over quiet Willow Creek. Inside the clinic, Shadow slept soundly for the first time since he'd arrived, his body curled beside Daniel's chair, breaths deep and even. Jessica watched the pair, her heart light for the first time in days. In her mind, she replayed Ruthie's words sometimes. When a dog chooses to save you, that's not luck. That's love and grit. The moon hung high over Willow Creek, pale and watchful, casting long shadows across the quiet fields. Inside the Evans Veterinary Clinic, all was still, except for the steady hum of the heater and the occasional creak of settling floorboards. Jessica lay dozing in her office chair, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, the strain of the day written on her face. Daniel, exhausted but alert, sat on a makeshift cot near Shadow's bed, his notebook in his lap and a pen still clutched in his fingers. Shadow, the German shepherd, now fully awake and visibly healthier, lay curled at Daniel's feet, breathing slow and deep, occasionally flicking his ears at unfamiliar sounds from outside. Near midnight, a different kind of stillness crept in, a tension that prickled at Daniel's skin and set Shadow's hackles on edge. The dog, rose nostrils flaring, tail stiff body, suddenly rigid with attention. Daniel sat up alert and listened. At first, he heard nothing but the distant wind. Then came a faint crunch of gravel from the parking lot, followed by the soft click of a car door shutting. Shadow crept to the front window and peered through the blind's, muscles taut as drawn wire. Daniel followed, careful to remain hidden behind the counter. He saw movement, a shadow slipping past the porch light, then another, then a third. 3 figures, all dressed in dark clothes, hoods pulled low, faces masked. One was tall and broad, moving with a heavy, deliberate step. The second was shorter, with a quick darting motion. The third, lean and wiry, moved with surprising quietness. None of them looked familiar, and all 3 radiated a sense of purpose that sent Daniel's heart hammering. Jessica woke at the sound of Daniel's urgent whisper. "Jess, wake up! There's someone outside." Her eyes snapped open, immediately alert. She slipped quietly to the window and took in the scene, face hardening. "We need to get to the back room," she whispered. "Take Shadow." Before they could move, there was a sharp rap at the front door. Daniel froze as one of the men tried the handle, then began working at the lock with gloved fingers. Jessica's mind raced. She grabbed her phone, dialing Tom Carter, but the call went straight to voicemail. The group outside muttered, voices low but tense. "We know the dog's here." The tallest one, growled, voice muffled by his mask. "Hurry up!" Jessica ushered Daniel and Shadow into the back hallway, moving swiftly but quietly. She remembered the emergency exit leading out to the alley behind the building. She signaled for Daniel to get the leash on Shadow, but the dog resisted at the sound of hurried footsteps near the door, body pressed protectively against Daniel's side. Jessica glanced around, grabbing a flashlight and a small bag of supplies. "Come on," she urged. Suddenly, glass shattered at the front. The 3 men spilled into the clinic, flashlight sweeping across the reception area. They moved with chilling efficiency, one heading toward the exam rooms, another to the kennels, and the third prowling the front counter, searching for signs of the dog. Jessica and Daniel slipped out the rear door, hearts pounding, Shadow at their heels. The cold night air bit at their faces as they ran across the dark lot, keeping to the shadows. Jessica's truck was too close to the building, too risky to reach. "Ruthie's farm," Daniel whispered, already thinking ahead. Jessica nodded. "It's our best shot." They set off at a brisk pace, Daniel clutching Shadow's leash, Jessica keeping a lookout behind them. Willow Creek was silent, but for their footsteps and the rustle of the wind in the trees. Shadow kept glancing back, sensing danger, ears flat and growl, rumbling deep in his throat. After 10 tense minutes, they reached Ruthie's farm. The old farmhouse stood like a sentinel in the nightlights, glowing warm behind the curtains. Ruthie herself answered the door, alert and unafraid. She had changed into an old wool sweater and thick work pants, hair loose around her shoulders, a shotgun resting near the door. Not out of fear, but from the lifelong habit of someone who'd lived through storms, droughts, and the rare coyote. Her eyes widened as she saw Jessica and Daniel, then narrowed with resolve. Inside, quick. They entered Shadow, following closely. Inside, the warmth and smell of baking bread settled their nerves. Ruthie poured mugs of cocoa for Jessica and Daniel, and knelt to greet Shadow, who pressed his head gratefully into her hand. Ruthie listened to their hurried account, her face set with determination. "You did right coming here," she said. "We'll keep watch tonight." She handed Jessica her old rotary phone. "Try Tom again." While Jessica made the call this time, reaching Tom and relaying what happened, Daniel led Shadow to the mudroom, laying out a thick blanket for him. The German shepherd was still tense, but began to relax as Ruthie scratched behind his ears and spoke softly, "You're safe here, old boy." Sheriff Tom Carter arrived within 30 minutes, his cruiser's headlights sweeping over the fields. Tom was solidly built jacket, buttoned against the chill, a frown etched deep between his brows. He listened to Jessica's report, inspecting the clinic and noting the damage, collecting evidence and shining his flashlight over the tracks left by the intruders. This wasn't random, he said grimly. They came for the dog, and they knew how to move fast. Back at Ruthie's, Tom questioned Daniel and Jessica, jotting details in his worn leather notebook. He promised extra patrols around both properties and advised them not to be alone, especially at night. These aren't amateurs, he said, and they might try again. That night, Ruthie made up beds for her guests in the farmhouse's sunroom, which overlooked the fields and the old red barn. Daniel fell asleep with Shadow curled by his side, hand resting gently on the dog's back. The dog shifted restlessly, occasionally sitting up and pricking his ears as a distant sound drifted through the open window. It was a faint, wavering wail, Tom's police cruiser's siren passing along the main road. Shadow tensed, body rigid, then let out a low, anxious whine tail thumping uneasily. Daniel sat up, surprised. Shadow's whole posture had changed, alert, almost fearful. When the siren faded, the dog finally settled, though he kept glancing at the door, as if waiting for something or someone from his past to reappear. Daniel took note, jotting it down in his ever-present notebook. Shadow reacts strangely to police sirens. Fear memory, must ask Jess. Morning found the farmhouse peaceful. Tom returned after a long night, reporting no sign of the intruders, but promising to keep up the search. Jessica and Daniel thanked Ruthie for her hospitality. Before they left, Ruthie squeezed Jessica's hand, her grip strong. You can stay as long as you need. You're not alone. As the sun rose over Willow Creek, its rays gilding the wheat fields, Jessica felt hope flicker again, even as shadows lingered on the edges of her thoughts. She looked down at Shadow, who met her gaze with trusting, soulful eyes. Whatever trials lay ahead, they would face them together with courage, with community, and with the unspoken bond that only a loyal dog and those who love him can understand. By the end of the week, Willow Creek was buzzing with rumors. The break-in at the clinic had not gone unnoticed. Whispers passed through the aisles of the feed store and across the counters at the diner. Sheriff Tom Carter had not rested, dark circles deepening beneath his clear blue eyes, his uniform more rumpled than usual as he coordinated with state investigators. Tom, a figure of steady resolve, had a certain gravity in his broad shoulders and even stride, a man weathered by decades of small-town secrets, now facing something bigger than his usual rounds. He called Jessica and Daniel to the sheriff's office early that morning, the sun still just a glimmer beyond the fields. The office was a converted farmhouse cluttered with papers, battered furniture, and an ancient coffee maker that hissed like a tired old mule. Tom gestured for them to sit, then introduced Detective Marissa Blake from the state police, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s, medium height, slim but athletic, with a neat dark ponytail and an air of unhurried confidence. Her handshake was firm, her gaze unwavering as she sized up Jessica and Daniel with the practiced precision of someone used to extracting truth from tangled stories. Let's talk about your dog. Marissa began sliding a folder across the table. The file was thick, full of reports, photos, and names Jessica didn't recognize. We've been tracking a pattern for the past 18 months, Marissa continued. Disappearing dogs, particularly German shepherds, all with signs of advanced training, and more recently, unusual electronic implants. Daniel's throat went dry as Jessica placed a hand over his, steadying him. Tom added, "Last night we found a van abandoned near the river. Inside were animal cages, electronic equipment, and papers referencing a group called Arcturus Technologies." Jessica's eyes widened. Arcturus. Marissa nodded. They operate under different names, some legit, some not. Their specialty is neural research, behavior, modification, remote control of animal responses. We believe they partnered with defense contractors to develop test subjects. Shadow may have been one, Daniel blurted. So he wasn't just lost, he escaped, or was discarded. Marissa replied gently when the experiment failed or became inconvenient. Meanwhile, across town, Ruthie Wilson was in action. The formidable farmer, never one to back down from a threat, had rallied her friends and neighbors. Ruthie's tall frame and bracing presence filled any room, and her reputation for fairness and courage inspired trust. That afternoon, she held a meeting in the barn, straw scattered beneath the benches. Old Carl Jensen attended, along with Martha Henry, short, wiry, and always dressed in plaid, a retired teacher with a mouthful of sharp opinions, and Emmett Diaz, the town's mechanic, a heavy-set man in grease-stained coveralls, whose booming laugh could disarm the crankiest bull. "We're not letting strangers chase off our own," Ruthie announced, arms folded across her chest. "That dog has a place here same as any of us." Martha spoke up, voice gruff but caring. "I saw those men creeping past the schoolyard. They were looking for something, or someone." Emmett nodded, thumping a fist into his palm. "I fixed their truck last week, out-of-towners cash, payment didn't say a word. I got their plates if you want 'em, Sheriff." Tom, who had come at Ruthie's invitation, jotted the number in his notebook and smiled wryly. "Thank you, Emmett. Every detail helps." Back at the sheriff's office, Marissa showed Jessica and Daniel the scan of Shadow's chip and a grainy photo of an anonymous facility, a low gray building ringed by chain-link fencing and security cameras. "This is one of their sites. We suspect at least a dozen dogs were tested here. Most weren't recovered. But Shadow, he survived. We don't know how he made it out. But his chip was transmitting until the night you removed it." Jessica remembered the strange device Ruthie had found. "So they tracked him to Willow Creek." Marissa nodded. "We're sweeping the area for more devices. But you should be careful. These people are determined and they don't care who gets in their way." After the meeting, Ruthie coordinated shifts for friends to keep watch at her farm and the clinic. Old Carl perched on his ATV near the property line, shotgun across his lap, and a thermos of coffee at his side. Martha and Emmett set up walkie-talkies and extra lights along the fences. Even teenagers from the high school volunteered, cycling through on their bikes to keep an eye on strangers and report anything unusual. The townsfolk, used to quiet nights and open doors, found unity in the face of danger. That evening, Jessica sat on Ruthie's porch, the air cool and sweet with the promise of rain. Shadow lay at her feet, tail-flicking eyes half closed, but attentive. Daniel joined her, his face serious. "It all makes sense now," he said softly. "The way Shadow reacts to police sirens, the scars the chip they trained him to, obey certain cues. He wasn't afraid of us. He was afraid of being used." Jessica stroked Shadow's head, tears threatening, but not falling. "He chose us, Dan. He chose freedom. And now, we have to protect him." In the dusk, Tom drove by in his cruiser headlights, flashing a signal, and the townspeople waved. The sense of community was palpable. Farmers, teachers, mechanics, teenagers, all united in their determination to guard one frightened but extraordinary dog. Even Pumpkin, the clinic cat, had taken up watch on the windowsill tail, twitching ready to sound the alarm if needed. As night fell, Ruthie brewed strong coffee for the volunteers, telling stories of the old days, her laughter and resolve carrying through the house. Shadow, now truly part of the household, rested his head on Daniel's knee, no longer trembling at the sound of distant sirens. Jessica sat beside them, a new hope stirring in her heart. The truth was no longer a weight, it was a call to action. Shadow was not alone, and neither were they. The next evening dawned heavy and humid thunderheads, pressing low over the golden expanse of Willow Creek's wheat fields. Despite the summer heat, an undercurrent of tension rippled through town. The townspeople, now vigilant and united, continued their nightly patrols. Ruthie's barn lights burned late volunteers clustered with walkie-talkies and thermoses of coffee, while Sheriff Tom's cruiser rolled steadily along the dusty back roads, his silhouette visible in each passing window. Shadow, growing ever more confident, patrolled the farmhouse with Daniel at his side. The German shepherd's coat had regained its luster, and his stride, once haunted, was now alert and purposeful. He was lean but strong, moving with an athletic grace, amber eyes keen for any sign of threat. Daniel, emboldened by recent days, had grown protective of Shadow and the small family that had gathered to defend him. Shortly after midnight, as thunder grumbled on the horizon, a distant engine sputtered and died beyond the fields. Emmett Diaz, keeping watch on the barn's old porch swing, lifted his binoculars and spotted figures moving near the wheat. 3 men and a woman, all in dark clothing, moving with a furtiveness that didn't belong to honest folk. The woman, tall and slender with angular features and a stern expression, barked orders in a clipped voice, coordinating her companions with impatient gestures. Her name, as the group would soon learn, was Karen Finch, a former researcher turned enforcer for Arcturus Technologies. Karen's hair, once blonde, was pulled tight beneath a ball cap, and her pale, sharp eyes seemed to miss nothing in the dark. Emmett raised the alarm, and a flurry of action swept the farmhouse. Ruthie shotgun at her side, herding everyone indoors. Daniel, heart-pounding, gripped Shadow's collar. Jessica checked the locks and quickly dialed Tom. "They're here," she whispered barely above a breath. Outside, Karen and her team cut through the edge of the wheat field, flashlights sweeping in frantic arcs. "Find the dog," Karen hissed, impatience raw in her voice. "He can't have gotten far." The group fanned out, trampling stalks and muttering curses. Shadow pressed his nose to the mudroom door, muscles bunched, every sense attuned to the invaders. Daniel knelt beside him, voice trembling but resolute. "We'll keep you safe, Shadow. Promise." Jessica, quick thinking as ever, signaled Daniel to let Shadow out the back, hoping his instincts and speed would buy time. The German shepherd burst into the night, Daniel and Ruthie close behind, weaving between the old barns and into the tall wheat beyond. The chase spilled into the open field, wheat whispering secrets as Shadow darted ahead, the others following as best they could. Daniel struggled to keep up adrenaline, lending him speed, his sneakers slick with dew. Ruthie, sturdy and unyielding, kept pace, a beacon of determination beneath the moon. In the chaos, Pumpkin the clinic cat, ever fearless, slipped between the shadows, darting beneath the wheat to circle back toward the intruders. Meanwhile, Emmett and Martha Henry, short, sharp-tongued and unafraid, coordinated with townsfolk circling from the other side, herding the invaders deeper into the field. Sheriff Tom and Detective Marissa Blake arrived minutes later, sirens off, headlights dark, moving on foot, with flashlights and quiet resolve. Tom's presence, broad and reassuring, lent courage to those around him. Suddenly, a sharp yelp split the night. Karen had cornered Shadow near the irrigation ditch, her team fanning out to block escape. Shadow stood his ground tail, stiff fangs bared, growling low and thunderous. Karen, lips curled in a sneer, produced a slim device and advanced. "Come on, dog, back to your masters." Before she could lunge, Daniel crashed through the wheat, breathless, placing himself between Shadow and Karen. "He's not yours," Daniel shouted, his voice cracking, but full of conviction. At that moment, lights burst across the field, flashlights and lanterns from the townsfolk who'd surrounded the group. Ruthie's voice boomed above the chaos. "Not in my field, you don't." Emmett and Carl, flanking from either side, brandished farm tools with grim purpose. Sheriff Tom stepped forward, gun-drawn badge gleaming in the flashlight's glow. "You're done here," Tom declared, authority ringing in his words. "Drop it and get on your knees." Karen, realizing she was outnumbered, hesitated just long enough for Marissa Blake to sweep in and cuff her wrists. The other intruders panicked, tried to bolt, but were quickly restrained by Emmett and Carl, who proved surprisingly agile for men their age. Ruthie let out a triumphant whoop as the townsfolk closed ranks, encircling their adversaries. Shadow, breathing hard, limped to Daniel's side. Daniel buried his face in the dog's neck, relief and pride welling in his eyes. Jessica hugged them both, tears of gratitude streaming down her cheeks. The ordeal was over. By sunrise, the authorities had rounded up Karen's group, escorting them to waiting patrol cars. Tom approached Jessica, Daniel, and Ruthie as they watched Shadow bask in the golden dawn. Tom's face softened a rare smile, breaking through his usual reserve. "He's free now. No more running." Marissa nodded in agreement. "With this evidence and your testimonies, Arcturus will be held accountable. You all saved him and each other." The town buzzed with a new energy. Daniel, inspired by the courage and unity of the people around him, spent the next day composing an essay about Shadow's journey. He posted it online and pinned a copy to the community board at the diner, his words a tribute to loyalty, kindness, and the power of ordinary people to make a difference. The story spread through Willow Creek and beyond, touching hearts and sparking conversations about compassion and the value of every life, human or animal. That evening, under a sky streaked with lavender and gold, the townsfolk gathered for a cookout in Ruthie's yard, laughter and music echoing across the fields. Shadow, at the heart of the crowd, accepted head scratches and scraps with quiet dignity, finally at peace among his new family. A gentle dawn spilled gold across the wheat fields, bathing Willow Creek in a soft light that promised renewal. The air was clear after the storms and struggles, the world itself seeming to exhale in relief. At the heart of this quiet morning, the Evans Veterinary Clinic pulsed with new energy. Once a modest place, it now bustled with neighbors and animals, the waiting room filled with laughter, the scent of coffee and fresh-baked biscuits drifting through the open door. Shadow lay on a thick rug by the reception desk, content, his coat sleek and eyes wise with hard-won peace. The German Shepherd had become the symbol of Willow Creek, his ears pricked whenever a child approached, tail thumping at each gentle hand. Once, a nameless stray shadow, was now the town's heart, adopted by Jessica and Daniel, both changed by their journey. Jessica, more open and confident, had let her hair grow longer, often tied with a cheerful scarf, a smile never far from her lips. Daniel, taller and broader, with a new steadiness in his gaze, always carried his notebook and treated Shadow with a mixture of reverence and unguarded affection. The three had formed a bond beyond words, forged in fire and healing. It wasn't just the clinic that had changed. People throughout Willow Creek had started looking at animals and each other with new compassion. Donations filled the old tip jar by the counter. The waiting room was decorated with artwork from local children, crayon drawings of Shadow running through the fields, portraits of Pumpkin, the orange tabby, and bright banners with slogans like "Every creature counts." On a nearby wall, Daniel had posted his story about Shadow, which now bore dozens of signatures and handwritten messages of thanks. Jessica had expanded the clinic. Where once there had been a cramped supply closet, there was now an airy recovery room with soft beds for strays and rescues. She hired help, a quiet, strong-armed assistant named Angela, whose short hair and gentle eyes belied her quick laugh and steady nerves. Angela, new to town, but already beloved by clients, had once worked at a city shelter and brought a calming presence to the growing team. She bonded quickly with Shadow and even Pumpkin. The cat, notoriously picky, would consent to nap in her lap. Meanwhile, Ruthie Wilson's spirit radiated across the town. With her trademark denim jacket and steel gray braid, Ruthie became the driving force behind Willow Creek's animal rights initiatives. She and Daniel organized after-school workshops at the farm, teaching children how to care for animals, how to read their moods, and why every life deserved respect. Carl Jensen would join in, demonstrating basic farm skills and spinning stories about his own long line of loyal sheepdogs. Martha Henry led craft sessions, helping children create handmade collars and signs for the upcoming Adopt Don't Shop fair. Emmett Diaz, when not fixing tractors, built sturdy wooden kennels and ran dog washing stations at community picnics. Children adored these afternoons running barefoot in the fields, their laughter mingling with the yips of puppies and the lowing of Ruthie's cows. Shadow would lead the games, chasing a bright blue ball through the wheat, sometimes followed by a pack of energetic rescues, or the tiny feet of Pumpkin, who insisted on joining every adventure. The impact rippled outward. Sheriff Tom Carter, still gruff and meticulous, but now wearing a softer expression, partnered with the clinic to microchip local pets and promote responsible animal ownership. Detective Marissa Blake, though called away to other investigations, sent a letter commending the town's bravery and promising to share Willow Creek's story at state conferences. The story of Shadow, the once-lost dog who'd brought a town together, spread online, inspiring communities far beyond the county's edge. As the summer deepened, Jessica found herself busier than ever, but also fulfilled in ways she'd never imagined. She tended to old sheepdogs, and newborn kittens welcomed lost animals and new friends. Sometimes after a long day, she'd join Daniel and Shadow beneath the oak tree by the clinic, watching the sun set over the endless wheat. Daniel, now known for his gentle teaching and his gift with words, was often surrounded by local kids and their dogs telling stories until the fireflies appeared. On the day of the first Willow Creek Animal Fair, the town gathered under banners painted with paws and hearts. Ruthie gave a speech, her deep voice booming, as she told the story of Shadow's journey and what it meant for their home. "We are more than just a town," she said. "We are a family. We take care of our own two-legged and four-legged alike." The crowd erupted in cheers, and Shadow, sensing his name, barked once loud and clear, tail wagging. Even Pumpkin deigned to appear perched on a hay bale like the event's feline overseer. As dusk fell and the fair wound down, Daniel slipped away to the fields, Shadow close behind. The air was warm and full of the scent of wildflowers and cut grain. Daniel found his favorite spot, where the wheat bowed under the weight of late summer, and sat with his legs folded, the sky a tapestry of violet and rose. Shadow padded over, circling once before settling into Daniel's lap, head resting against his chest. Daniel stroked his ears, murmuring words that only a loyal dog would ever hear. It was a scene that captured everything Willow Creek had become: a place of safety, belonging, and quiet courage. In that peaceful moment, with fireflies dancing on the edge of the field and the distant laughter of friends and family, Daniel understood that Shadow was home at last and forever. The dog who had arrived lost and wounded was now the heartbeat of the town, and in his gentle eyes shone the reflection of all the love and healing they'd given and received. At the end of Shadow's journey, we are reminded that true healing and belonging can come from opening our hearts to the lost and broken animal or human. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to transform a life and unite a community. In our everyday lives, we all meet those who need a second chance. What if we chose compassion, just as Willow Creek did? Share this story if it touched your heart. Comment below with your thoughts or your own stories of rescue and hope, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new tale. Have you ever helped an animal or person in need? Tell us your experience in the comments.